Hello and welcome to the Michael Mamas Show. I'm your host, Michael Mamas, and we're coming to you from Mount Soma, home of the Sri Someshwara Temple in the mountains of western North Carolina. Today is a really interesting topic today. They talk about the transcendent Chaitanya, the absolute, and really from the perspective of our own experiences and how we relate to the absolute. It's probably best to view it as just flat, no thingness, pure isness, pure consciousness. When you meditate and you transcend, and you could say go into the transcendent, no thoughts, no mantra, just pure consciousness. And it's important to really keep that in mind, because what we're going to talk about today is, what lies within the transcendent, if you will. And it's very easy then when people hear that to get kind of carried away with it, and they think they're, having these experiences in the transcendent, whereas really it could be very fine relative, very profound levels of the relative, celestial level, but it's not really the transcendent, okay? But having said that, I wanted to talk about, what is going on with it in the transcendent. We've talked about the Brahmanas, and we've talked about how the Brahmanas are sort of like the structuring within the absolute, within the transcendent. And then it manifests into relativity through certain point values, which are the Sanskrit letters in the Sanskrit alphabet. And they structure the sounds, the vibrations, the sounds of the mantras, and that becomes foundational then to all of relative existence, okay? But see, there is this structure within the absolutes called the Brahmanas. And then you have what they call the Vedic literature. I don't really know why they call it literature. I mean, I do, I get it, but in a way, it's so much more than just literature. It has to be said that way, really, because it's an expression, though, of the inner dynamic, the inner structural dynamic of the Brahmanas. But it's so much more than just what we think of, I guess, is literature, there's Vedic cognition. And Vedic cognition is regarded in two ways. It's regarded, one way is the cognition of the Rig Veda itself, that structure, that of the dynamic now of the cognitions of the manifest process of existence, the mandalas, like that. And then there's the cognition of the Vedic literature. And traditionally, commonly, it's been thought that, it's a higher thing to cognize Rig Veda directly than to just cognize the Vedic literature. But actually, that's not exactly right, because cognizing the Rig Veda itself is like, those are like the mountain peaks. The Shruti, it's called, the sounds, the vibrational sounds that are foundational to relative existence. But to cognize the Vedic literature is sort of like to weave together to jump from mountain peak to mountain peak and be cognizing the structure that is foundational to the relationship, the inner dynamic between those mountain peaks, those mantras, the Veda. And so, and where does that structure come from? It comes from the Brahmanas, which are within the Absolute. But now there's a thing, jasper. Picture jasper. Picture jasper is a mineral. It's a rock, and it's really beautiful because if you cut through picture jasper and sort of polish it, it creates. You've probably seen this. It creates different sort of landscapes. It looks like landscapes. Sometimes it looks like a desert scene. You cut through it another way, and maybe it looks like mountains. Cut through it another way, it looks like the ocean. You know. It's called picture jasper because you cut through it, however you cut through it, you get another picture. And that's similar to, we can use an analogy to that it's similar to the self-interacting dynamic, that unbounded ocean of consciousness interacting with itself, consciousness, Chaitanya, pureness. Consciousness before it becomes conscious of anything, certainly of anything in the relative, you see. Depending on, it's like the Brahmanas are like expressions of that structure, the fundamental foundation of that structure, expressed from all the different angles, which are the different aspects of Vedic literature. But the whole thing is lively. It's not just stagnant. It's a dynamic. And so to compare it to like picture jasper, you can slice through it, if you will, in any number of different ways. And each way you slice through it, you could say gives a different story, if you will. Now, we talk about that structure and everything in a very almost mechanical way, you know? Very impersonal almost. But if you think about it, what manifests out of that is personified beings, you, me, our pets, you know, living things. They have a personified correlate, and it's that personified correlate that gives it more meaning. When you talk to another person, it's not like you're talking to a bunch of electrons, protons, and neutrons, you know, the mechanic. No. You're talking to the personified value. That's what gives meaning. That's what it really is in a deeper sense. And like that, within that self-interacting dynamic within the Absolute itself, it's all personified. It's all about the Deva values, the gods, if you will. It's one God, one unified field, interacting with itself in an infinite number of different ways, creating all these different stories, if you will. One version, one slice through that picture jasper that is the Absolute. It's like Lord Krishna manifesting, strictly speaking, they're called prapancham. In the West, we call them universes, so that's fine. But it's like he has a little pouch on his belt, you know, and he's dancing like from that Tambourine Man or that song, you know, to dance beneath the diamond sky with one hand waving free, you know. So he gets some of the fairy dust, if you will, out of the pouch, and he's dancing beneath the diamond, and he throws it in there, and he says, "This is how I create universes." And every little speck of fairy dust is the foundation, the seed form of another universe. That's one slice through the self-interacting dynamic pie. But now there's another slice through it. Where did this universe come from? Where did the propuntions come from? A thought. Brahma is the creator. Why? Because he just had the thought and the boom. That was the seed form that manifests the whole creation. So you see, it's very much physics, but physics per se is the sterile, stagnant component of it. And it goes so far beyond that to view it in terms of pure mechanics is to compromise it horribly. Now, human beings have a particular type of nervous system, human nervous system. Different plants, different animals, they all have their own type of nervous systems, if you will, and they're different. The human nervous system doesn't have the capacity, this goes back to what I started saying in the beginning, doesn't have the ability, doesn't have the capacity to enter into those transcendental structures and function within them. For one reason, it said that the human mind only has the capacity to know one thing at a time. Now, I know I've heard some people say, oh, no, I think of many things all the time, constantly. Well, I hope you can, not get stuck with that, because, if you break it down, it's one, just they might be all piled on top of each other, but it's one at a time. Whereas, that's where the word omniscience comes from, all-knowingness, that type of nervous system that can function within that infinitely correlated, self-interacting dynamic of all the different slices through the same one picture jasper stone all at the same time. It's a different nervous system that does that. Human beings don't have that. That's why they say that the structure within the absolute, we have no idea. We just get one little glimpse of its expression through our prapancham, through our universe, if you will, and that's it. And I know that kind of rubs the common mentality the wrong way. We want to think that, well, we have a certain, we know we're defined. We know that at this depth of our being, we are one with that one thing. But if the echoes of that, the mappings of that, if we're not well integrated, goes to arrogance. We're the center of the universe. There can't be any UFO people because this is ours, and or how dare you say I can't enter the absolute and fathom the whole thing, or it even enters into the idea of I know some people I've heard this through the grapevine, that somebody, or maybe it's more than one person, I don't know, but they were saying that, we're pretty, at Mount Soma here, we're pretty selective. And why don't we have a Buddhist temple? Why don't we have this or that? Or why don't we include all these things? And see, there's a distinction between being closed-minded versus being discerning. And discernment includes allegiance, if you will, to a particular path. There are all kinds of different carburetors, but you can't just stick any kind of carburetor into any one vehicle and have it work. There's a specificity to it. And what I like about the Vedic tradition is that it's so rigorous. All the details, all the fineness of the mechanics of how to structure our lives in a way that is consistent with that transcendental value. It's not a no holds bar free for all. Oh yeah, well, this is all great, and this is what I think my God is. We can't expect God to conform to our notions of what God is supposed to be. It's more about tuning our awareness to God. And what is God? Our own true nature, our own divinity. You see? So it's not narrow-mindedness. It's discernment. And like Adi Shankar said, the spiritual path is a path of discernment. You see? So it's kind of an amazing thing then, because within the Brahmana, within the absolute, it's almost like, dancing from one mountain peak to the next. Like, that's the cognitions of the Brahmanas and all the implications of that. Whereas the relative is like just the tips at the top of each mountaintop, which is wonderful. We could liken that to the Sanskrit alphabet, to the seed forms, the Shruti, the point values out of which all relative existence emerges. But the sky above it is so much bigger, so huge, and so inaccessible within the relative, you see. So we reach for the ungraspable. And that's our deepest longing, is to grasp the ungraspable. That's what love is, the longing to unify. It's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. So the relative, by definition, is relative. And relative creates paradox. There's this viewpoint and there's that viewpoint. It's all relative. And there's no resolution there. It's paradoxes. That's what if it was resolvable, it wouldn't be a paradox. But all paradox does find its resolution within the absolute, within the transcendent, within Chaitanya. You see? Is that all making sense, Scotty?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, having said all of that, there's so much, there's so many tangents to this whole thing. Like, with the James Webb telescope, now they're finding all these cosmic enigmas, things they can't figure out. They thought they had a handle on it, and it's just so far beyond what they were thinking. And the things the telescope is seeing, it's like, we don't have a clue. And we don't have a clue. We're functioning in the relative, and largely we're lost to the relative. The depth of our being has that purity, that divinity. But as we've said before, we're living in a house of mud, and so when it comes to leadership and running a country, democracy is what comes about when there's nobody around who's fit to lead. Sherman, that general from the Civil War, Sherman's March, he called democracy mob rule, which I think is funny. I don't know, it tickled me when he said it, when I saw that he had said that. But of course, it beats tyranny. So there we are in the relative, It's all an enigma, be it a cosmic enigma, or be it how to run a government or how to organize a business or anything. It's also enigmatic. It's so relative. And so we have cultures, and different cultures are more aligned with that underlying structure of divinity that we access through the Shruti, through that structure, the depth of our being. That's which structures all of this relative existence in its most fundamental form, its most intimate with that field of divinity, that field of perfection, And so cultural integrity has the value, a healthy culture has the value of helping people stay aligned, stay in tune. It's like a tuning fork for a piano, The tuning fork helps the piano stay in tune with itself, if you will. But we've lost that. The culture's gone crazy. And I think that's a big source of why riots, why rebellions, why chaos is reigning. and why they're coming up with these crazy ideas and trying to put them into law. Well, it's because we've lost our rudder. We've lost our direction. The whole world is flailing in oblivion. And it's because we try to fathom the depth of our lives from the surface. And you can justify anything with the intellect. And when the physiology is out of balance, our emotions can throw us in a myriad of different directions. And that's why I think, kids, it's horrible. I mean, they look at their families, they look at the world, they look at everything. It's a big mess. And so they're desperate. Because we're desperate for that guidance, really, inner guidance, inner wisdom. And it's just not accessible through the guidelines, if you will, through the support group that we have, that we call our life and our world. And so we rebel, they do drugs, they do this, they do that. Then they're desperate. And that's the state of the world today. And it's so essential that we understand this bigger picture, that there is an underlying structure. And it's a source of harmony, intelligence, wisdom, fulfillment, happiness, coherence, no wars, the whole thing. But it's accessed from within. And in a global sense, all we need to do is clean the fishbowl. The global consciousness is polluted, is another way of saying it. And we clean that up and everything's fine. That's why we're building Mount Soma, because there's a technology that comes from the Veda, how to do that. I remember this thing back when I was in high school. I listened to Bob Dylan. He's a great poet. I mean, it's recognized now. Back then, he was just considered some hippie, right? Or whatever. But he says, of war and peace, the truth just twists. He's talking about life and the relative, But then he says, the curfew gall that glides. Yeah, that's beautiful, really, because he's saying that somewhere up there, there's the gall, the curfew gall. When all that is quiet, there's curfew, and it glides. There is a place of peace. But then he says, upon four-legged forest clouds. I mean, what words? Four-legged, four is even symbolic of relativity, four-legged forest over the forest clouds. The cowboy angel rides. I mean, cowboy angel. I mean, everything's crazy. It's a cowboy, Yahoo. And that's the angel riding upon the cloud that oversees the forest of life on four legs. But then he says, beautifully, he says, with a candle held unto the sun. So again, there's that longing, that deep longing, that inner knowing that is there, that transcendent is there. And then it says, though its glow, the candle's glow is waxed in black. It's in the relative. There's oblivion. That's where we're functioning. Then it says, all except when 'neath the trees of Eden, in the transcendent, you see. So that's what we're about. We access that. We help society access that. We start functioning in harmony with nature, which is Mother Nature, which is the transcendent, which is our own true nature. And that brings fulfillment to every individual in life, There's no need for all the foolishness and all the suffering that's going on. And that's the bottom line. And it's right there. Brahmanas, mantras. It's in the Veda, even the technology, how to build an enlightened city that'll purify the global consciousness. It's all right there. But what's essential, the essential key is understanding this bigger picture, this deeper knowledge, which is there in the Veda. It's right there. All right. I think that's it, Scotty.
Great job.
Okay. Thanks, everybody, for listening. And we'll talk again next week.